Did you have to do a lot of research for this?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of
Fortunately, I keep up
research?
a lot on geopolitics and technology and things on how you can use technologies and their effect on the world and everything. So,
Huh.
but, you look at things like AI and deep fakes and all this, and you kind of look at it, it's very depressing because
It
you
is
wonder
depressing.
how are people going to be able to make, in a democracy, how can you make informed decisions if you don't know the facts, you don't know the truth, you don't know if what
Exactly.
you're looking at is real. And
It's like,
so,
yeah,
how do you control that?
it's
I
like
don't
a
know.
post-truth world.
It is, and you have foreign actors like Russia that
Hmm.
are very good, or North Korea, and they're very good at getting on there with their bots and their
Hmm.
factories and creating alternate realities for people and impersonating people. And so
Absolutely.
I have characters that are trying to stop that, you
Hmm.
know. And I find it really interesting how AI can figure out things that humans can't.
Like
Um,
what? Like what kind of
well,
thing?
I thought a really interesting the reason I had this idea a little bit is they found that AI they were using AI to look at chest X-rays
Hmm.
of people, and it turned out the AI knew the race of all the people it was these chest X-rays were from, but they never gave it that information, and no one has any idea how it does it because humans can't figure out a person's race by looking at their chest X-ray, and AI, because it's learning internally, is kind of a black box. And so even the people who program the AI couldn't figure out how it was doing it.
That's
And so
so interesting.
it's so weird. It's really weird. But
Yeah.
machines don't think like humans. They think in a completely, so maybe something that's obvious to a computer. I mean, you'll think about the old days. What's obvious to a computer? What's 482 times 386? Impossible for us. But then they couldn't do language, which is super easy for us.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that my conception of AI, having grown up, in the 80s and 90s, whatever, is that AI is limited by what humans are capable of because we're doing the programming, but what you're describing is like taking it to a new level. It's like they've surpassed humans and they are thinking on their own, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they've surpassed us in some ways, but are much way behind us in other ways. And so as it advances, you start to wonder if it's going to think of things in very different ways because
Right.
we evolved have biases. Like the idea, you think about physics, not to be super boring, but that time flows at a constant rate. That was a huge bias that we had in Einstein because it seems obvious to us, but that's not necessarily a
Right.
bias that a machine would have because it didn't grow up by having to run away from saber-toothed tigers and have its mind formed
Right.
that way. So they're
Right.
going to have completely different biases and different capabilities. I love that idea because what could they figure out or screw up?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And
So
so, and I think that's where our destiny is very much tied to machine learning destiny now. And that may be a good thing. It might be a bad thing, but fun to think about in the current
for
context.
sure.
But, and so would you ever want to move forward into today?
Um,
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I would. I feel like, I mean, the spy novel genre is there. It tends to be kind of saturated by a couple current issues, which are like Russia and Ukraine, or well, that's pretty much it when it comes to foreign policy, or I guess now, sort of
Israel to some extent now.
Israel. Although I think many authors like me are staying away from that, to be honest.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, I guess there are the other thing. There's Africa, there's China. There are other other geopolitical arenas, but I guess I do kind of think some of the maybe past conflicts are a little more interesting than yeah. So
I mean, the Soviet era, I've always wanted to write about that. I love the like hollow nickel with the with
Yeah, like the
the
sticks and
dot
bricks
in it or something like
tradecraft.
that.
Yeah,
No, it's like watching the original James Bond movies. Everybody had amazing suits and cool
right.
cars and
Right. Well, it's interesting too to watch how, and maybe this is part of the reason why I prefer to write about the past. I mean, it's interesting to watch how spy novels have evolved to try to keep pace with changing technology because now, they have what's called ubiquitous technical surveillance, where a lot of the stuff I learned at the farm is obsolete, when you're doing surveillance detection routes and you're doing like brush passes and dead drops. And a lot of that is sort of obviated now by the fact that there are cameras everywhere
yeah,
and every you're monitored constantly. I mean, that didn't really exist when I was going through the farm. And a lot of the spy novels I mean, the tradecraft is all the same now because it all has to do with this ubiquitous technical surveillance, which from a writing perspective to me isn't quite as interesting because it takes away a big part of the human factor. It takes away the human interaction and the tradecraft that comes with that. So I think that maybe that's part of the reason I gravitate toward kind of the old school settings. Um,
yeah.
but
I mean, it is,
actually,
it's really is hard. I wrote, particularly if you're trying to operate in sort of the dictatorships. I
yeah,
wrote, I wrote some scenes where my operative was in Saudi Arabia, which is a heavy surveillance state. And it was very much became about he could be on the ground 3 days, but that would be absolute maximum before they figured out he was there. And all the things he was doing to stay off those cameras, to disguise himself, to do all these things. And it became really kind of onerous, like not interesting because we wanted to be car chases and beautiful
right.
women and all this, but it was much more, I'm going to crawl through the sewer where there aren't any, or
Right.
whatever.
Well, and for many years, I mean, like in Russia, they didn't actually do source meetings in Russia. You would meet you. It was such it was such a high threat area, in terms of surveillance that you would only meet people in third countries. So, all the sexy things that you want to write about, like brush passes in Moscow or whatever, like that wasn't happening.
No, and in the movies, it's always the rave, right? You're at the disco, and
Right.
it's all the Eastern Europeans are at the disco planning to blow up the world, which is great scenery, but probably not actually very realistic.
Yes, that's right.